Come to order. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to our Baines Council meeting on Tuesday, the 24th of February 2026. Joe, could you read out the emergency evacuation procedure, please?
If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building and proceed to the assembly point. From this room, you follow the green running person signs to the exit, using either the marble staircase at the end of the building nearest to Bath Abbey or the main staircase. Please do not use the lifts. The assembly point for this building is in Orange Grove on the green outside Browns. Thank you.
Are there any apologies for absence, please?
Chris?
Sorry, Chris Stando?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I wish to preemptively give my apologies because I will be leaving this meeting to attend the anniversary concert in Bath Abbey, and I wish to place on record my astonishment that this meeting is going ahead today, given what we know is going on in the same place. So I will be leaving to attend that meeting shortly.
We did, of course, have a special Ukrainian event this afternoon.
We've had apologies from councillors Alex Beaumont and Paul Roper. Thank you.
We're on to item 3, and I'd like to inform councillors that the monitoring officer has granted a general dispensation to all councillors in respect of their payment of council tax, being parish councillors and school governors, in regard to item 8. Also, a specific dispensation for disclosable pecuniary interest declared by councillors has also been granted. And Joe, you're going to read this out.
Yes, and that covers councillors Sarah Warren, Saskia Helcher, Sarah Moore and Steve Hedges. And those are for councillors who have a family member in receipt of council SEND support, social care support or working for Baines. Thank you.
Are there any other further declarations, Joe? No? Now come along to the minutes, and I'd like a proposer and a seconder. A proposer first to say the minutes are correct. Okay, thank you, Councillor Wright. And I'd like a seconder, please. Councillor Ball. Can we have a show of hands to show that these are correct? Thank you. I'd like to remind everybody to switch your mobile phones off or to silent, and to turn off microphones when finished speaking. Also, you need to log into a microphone unit to be able to speak and vote. If the microphone battery light is flashing, do not swap with another unit as the camera is tracked to that councillor at that spot. Just indicate to the operator and it can be quickly changed. The meeting is being webcast, and if anybody doesn't wish to be filmed, please make yourselves known so that the camera operators are aware. And I'd like to remind councillors that following dispatch of the main agenda pack, Annex 13 of the budget report has been circulated and is available on the website. And now, I'd like to invite the new Chief Executive, Sophie Broadfield, to address this meeting. Thank you, Sophie.
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to take the opportunity to speak at the beginning of the meeting, as Will spoke at the beginning of the last one, to say his goodbyes, to thank you all for entrusting in me the position of Head of Paid Service at Bath and North East Somerset Council. It really is an incredible honour and privilege to be sitting here today. The Council is an amazing organisation to be a part of. I attended the Ukrainian 4-year celebration just earlier today, and it really brings home the power of local government to bring together businesses, charities and local communities to support, in that case, refugees in their time of need. I've been visiting services since I started at the beginning of January, and from our housing services to CCTV, from our care homes to parking enforcement, we do such a lot of things in our place that impact on people's lives every day. Our staff keep people safe, they protect our environment, and they improve our places. But I wanted to say in this context that our work as officers in the Council relies on all of you as representatives of your communities. Thank you for knowing what your residents need, for advocating for the priorities in your area, and for engaging as councillors in your evenings and spare time to represent your residents. I'm really looking forward to working with all of you to improve people's lives in Bath and North East Somerset. And thank you for choosing me as your Chief Executive.
Thank you, Sophie. I have no urgent business, so now we go to agenda item 7, which is items from the public. I would just like to say that public questions and responses have already been circulated. I have 6 people to speak on my list, and I'd like to remind them that their statements should last no more than 3 minutes. They may well get factual questions from group leaders, and that their statements will be reported to the relevant Cabinet member. My first person on my list is Dominic Taylor. Dominic, would you like to approach?
Yes, certainly. On the 25th of March 2022, in light of the conflict in Ukraine that had begun the month prior, the Council very honourably resolved to extend their support and solidarity to Ukrainian people. It isn't quite what happened, because what the Council has actually done is extend the support and solidarity to the Ukrainian government. The Ukrainian flag has been flying over the building ever since. As we entered this evening, we saw the entrance illuminated with yellow and blue on either side. There is a sign in the marketplace informing visitors, accompanied by the Ukrainian flag, how far they are from Kiev. We no longer have Russian language commentaries in tourist attractions, despite the fact that Russian is spoken by 250 million people, many of them Ukrainians, but we do have Ukrainian language commentaries, even though Ukrainian is only spoken by less than 40 million people. And a while back, the Council hosted Ukrainian war propaganda in the public library, clearly expressing a desire for victory at any cost, rather than for peace. So, no doubt aware, the current regime in Ukraine came into power in 2014 following Euromaidan, or the Euromaidan coup, as it's sometimes known, which the democratically elected President Viktor Yanukovych was ousted in power. In 2015, the Guardian described the new regime in the following terms: "Welcome to Ukraine, the most corrupt nation in Europe." In 2018, Reuters reported on Ukraine's neo-Nazi problem. In 2021, before the Russian invasion, NE Global declared that Ukrainian president's rule becoming increasingly corrupt and authoritarian. And indeed it did, for in 2022, the regime imposed martial law, prevented military-age men from leaving the country, and has not had an election ever since. In 2024, the BBC reported on the conscription squads wandering the land, abducting military-aged men to serve in the Ukrainian army. And if we look beyond corporate media, we find compelling evidence of money laundering, sabotaging of gas pipelines, forced organ harvesting, and harbouring bioweapons labs. And this is the regime that you have publicly supported for the past 4 years and continue to do so. Why might this be? Well, as you're also fully aware, on 25th of March 2022, the Council noted that it receives £10,500 per Ukrainian refugee, compared to the £4,600 it receives through taxes from each Bath and North East Somerset resident. So there's a strong financial incentive to support the perpetuation of a conflict that's already claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, including many Ukrainians with whom you have expressed your solidarity and support. However, it is never the business of a local council to take sides in an international conflict, nor to do anything that perpetuates violence and bloodshed. Hence, what I'm asking you to do is do what you committed to do 4 years ago and show your solidarity with the Ukrainian people and cease any actions that could be perceived as aggravating the conflict or supporting the regime currently present in their own country.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any factual questions from group leaders? No factual questions. I'd now like to call Jem Hovell forward, please, to speak.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak, and thank you very much for all the hard work you do. I am representing a small street, the Firs, running along the Firs Field in Combe Down. We only have 21 terraced houses, but we might be small and easily overlooked, but we have a major problem. We're really feeling the squeeze with so many different factors impinging on the parking, which we have zero control over. Some of the factors are, for example, we have no driveways, we're completely dependent on on-street parking. Unlike neighbouring streets, we have senior citizens, we have the less able-bodied, we have those with young children, We have professionals, including healthcare workers, coming and going late at night. We have tradesmen, including those who actually want to use the Firs field, find it really hard to find an accessible spot. The same is true of the surgery, the shops, other amenities, and we're a one-way exit point for the village, so we're a great place for people to park. On top of that, we've become a bit of a park and ride for the city, plus a long-stay car park for Coombe Garage, even when cars fail their MOTs. So when we get left with abandoned vehicles, we can do nothing about them for a month. This situation impacts residents and others on a daily basis and is causing very real tensions. We've actually made a case to the council for well over 8 years now, but with the pandemic, with changes, with difficulties in navigating the system, there have been a number of frustrating delays. So we're simply asking for a single RPZ for our postcode rather than a wider scheme. I know we realise that isn't the preference, but we feel a wider effort would actually compound the problems as well as create and continue the impasse. We hear that there are single streets that do exist as RPZs, or we could be attached to another one. We redid our household survey recently, and now 100% of those approached want to take this step. That's been a real turnaround. We really believe this mini scheme would have a massive impact, and we would love to find a way forward on this. As petty as it might seem, it's having a huge impact on individuals, even to the level of some death threats and some significant mental health issues for some of the residents. So anyway, thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you. Are there any factual questions from group leaders? Councillor Guy?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that point. Would you be willing to meet the cabinet member with yourselves and some fellow residents to discuss the issue further?
Yeah, we would love to do that. Thank you.
No more factual questions. Our next speaker is Mark Shelford.
Some of you may know I'm a bicyclist. I'm ready when you are. Madam Chair, councillors and officers and members of the supporting public, thank you for the opportunity.
Excuse me, Mark. Would you like to sit down? Otherwise the camera can't see you.
Well, that's probably a good thing, isn't it?
Up to you then, whatever you want.
As many of you will know, I am a cyclist, and I stand here this evening not to oppose cycling infrastructure.
Excuse me?
Yeah, could Mr Shelford please turn on his microphone as well, because we do have people here with hearing impairments. Thank you. In that case.
I'm slightly deaf. Could you repeat what he said?
He asked you to switch your microphone on.
I think it is on, isn't it?
On, yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Right, I'm going to compromise for all of you, because I know you're all friends. I'll sit down. If that's going to make it easier. Okay, where do we get to? I was a cyclist. I'm here this evening not to impose against cycling infrastructure, but to support active travel, but to ask that it is delivered safely and with proper consultation. I'm presenting this petition signed by 113 residents of Milton Avenue and Chaucer Road on Bear Flat, requesting that the cycle hanger that has been positioned at the junction of Chaucer Road and Milton Avenue be relocated. The petition is supported by the Bear Flats Association, who were not aware of the proposed location prior to the installation. The principles of cycling hangers is sound. The siting of this one is not. Placed directly at a crossroad junction, it has already contributed to one accident involving a cyclist, a collision with a delivery van, and more than 100 reported near misses. The hangar itself is showing signs of impact. It is a constrained residential junction with reduced sight lines, used daily by drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, and crucially, children walking to Beecham Cliff School. The safety risk is real and it is ongoing. Officers have confirmed that the relocation is being progressed and that safer alternative sites further along Chaucer Road have been identified. However, it is entirely reasonable to reflect on why we reached this position. Residents not directly consulted on the specific siting. The Bear Flats Association was unaware of the proposed location. The first they knew it was when it arrived on location. Through an FOI, I established that no safety case had been undertaken prior to the installation and that Avon and Somerset Police Highway Safety Team were not consulted, I asked. Smarter consultation and a proper safety assessment at the onset would almost certainly have avoided the cost, the risk and the community concern that you, as Council, now face. This is about delivering infrastructure competently and safely. Finally, I would like to thank the residents of Milton Avenue and Chaucer Road for their persistence, Peter Stacey for coordinating the petition, and the Bear Flats Association for their support. We stand ready to work constructively with the Council to secure a safer outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any factual questions from group leaders? Okay.
Defer to Councillor Jackson.
Councillor Jackson.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much.
Sorry, I will not try and impersonate the Honourable Councillor. I wanted to ask the Speaker, as I know he was in Radstock recently, if the same principles would apply to the cycle hanger that's parked outside the library in Radstock on the street.
Okay, would you like to answer that?
Well, I clearly can't answer that question because I'm not involved in the Radstock one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clare. Councillor Clare? Sorry, Councillor Clare, it is you this time.
Thank you. You say that suitable places have already been acknowledged to exist. Have you been told that they are prepared, therefore, to move to one of these? Because we had a very similar situation in the ward of Westmoreland, and one did get moved.
We saw the council officer who came up to have a look and site it with us. He sent a report following that visit, agreed that they should be moved, but it would now go into the process of the paperwork of the council and consultation before it was moved. And I'd ask council to move that along as quickly as possible.
Councillor Tim Warren.
Thank you. What consultation actually did take place? Sounds like not very much the way you're talking.
Well, no direct consultation took place with any of the residents. In other words, there were no letters sent to them, there were no emails sent to them. The Bear Flats Association were not notified of the locations. They just knew that across the whole of Bath and North East Somerset, bicycle hangers were going in. So specifically and directly, there wasn't. However, on the website, I'm sure that there was a consultation, but none of us saw it.
Okay, Councillor Wright.
Are you aware a TRO was used to locate all bicycle hangers?
Absolutely, and that is why...
consultation process?
Yes, I am aware of that, and that's why the officer has to put it into the paperwork of a new TRO in order to be able to move it to a safer place.
Thank you. Are there no more factual questions? Thank you very much.
May I hand over the petition? And then I'll get rid of my gear. Thank you. Thank you all very much. It's a joy to be here.
Thank you very much, Mark. That's very good to hear. He speaks for all of us, obviously. I'd like to call Ed Brownie next, please.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I was here in July last year to talk about public toilets, and again 10 days ago to speak to the Cabinet. And I return to reiterate the point which I feel is being missed. For context, I work in various jobs in tourism and hospitality in the city, and I live with a health condition which in part affects my digestion and bowels. Now, back in July, I came to talk in support of a motion calling for better public toilet strategy in Baines, and you all voted unanimously in favour. You all agreed public toilets are essential for hygiene, dignity and public health. That it's not a question of convenience, but about vital necessity to make the city better for residents and tourists, and indeed our economy. And this unanimous vote felt like a massive step forward. So I was upset to be shown a potential £10,000 cut to the public toilets contract in a long list of contracts facing cuts in this budget. It was discussed in the last Cabinet meeting that the cut amounted to 2% and would not reduce the service provided. But that's not what you all voted for. Not maintenance, but a strategy for better public convenience, for investment, or at the very least, using the money that we have better. So I'll remind everyone what I said last time, that didn't we agree that it's more about having somewhere to nip to the loo, which is important, but about a space for parents to attend the needs of their children, every menstruating girl or woman, about the 1 in 5 of us dealing with urinary incontinence and the 1 in 10 dealing with bowel control issues. Didn't we agree that? Now, in Bath, we're proud of being a top UK tourist destination, but our toilet provision is embarrassing. Baines funds 20 toilets for the entire district, and 16 of those are not free to use and closed overnight. I'd like to respond to one of the issues that was raised when I spoke last, regarding how expensive toilets can be to maintain in light of vandalism. And I find this a frustrating and short-sighted reply. I'm not denying that vandalism and misuse is a massive issue, but it feels like treating the community like children and telling them that if you can't look after things, we won't care about them. It's exactly the reason why we need a considered and publicly engaged strategy. If toilets are few and far between, then they're more likely to be targeted. Accessible and commonplace toilets would be used and appreciated. Now, I'm sure we want residents and tourists to feel confident they can spend time in our beautiful city and parks and public spaces. I'm sure we've also been in situations where we've been caught short, regardless of medical condition. No doubt you can imagine if at the start of this meeting I told you all that there were no accessible toilets in the building, you'd feel pretty uncomfortable and worried about how you were going to get through the meeting. And you're comfortable because you know this is not the case, and that's what's limiting people spending time in the city, residents and tourists. So I ask the Council to fulfil its promise, to take a serious look at public toilet provision, to invest rather than cut, to look at the money spent, and to recognise it's a fundamental necessity for better hygiene, public health and dignity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. Are there any factual questions from group leaders? Councillor Moss.
Thank you. As I'm sure you're aware, that one of the lines that the Council agreed in July was to engage with communities and partners to identify gaps and solutions. I wonder what contacts you've had from Baines Council about that.
None. I don't believe anyone's contacted the owner of the deli that I work for. Indeed, I haven't spoken to any tour guides, for instance, that have had any contact with any kind of consultation.
Thank you.
If there are no more factual questions, we'll then go on to our... Thank you very much, Ed. We'll now go on to our next speaker, who's Neil Dickinson. Is Neil Dickinson present? So moving on to Dave Redwell. I'm not sure I can see Dave. Okay. Right. So that has finished our statements from the public. We're now going to go on to agenda item 8, budget and council tax. And I'd like to remind members that any amendments to the budget proposal will only be considered after speeches from the Cabinet members, PDS chair and group leaders. Before we go into the actual budget details itself, I'd like to invite Councillor Kevin Guy to allow to propose that the length of speeches for the budget debate be varied. Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Chair. This is a normal procedure for most budget speeches, so I would like to move 3.13 suspension of rules, Rule 3.1 to 3.4 be suspended to allow the length of the speeches for the budget debate to be varied, Chair. I so move.
Many thanks. Councillor Moss, will you second this, please?
Happy to second that.
Can we just have a show of hands rather than an actual electronic vote? Right, that's unanimous. Right, I'd now like to invite Councillor Mark Elliott to present the budget recommended by the Cabinet and to formally move adoption of the recommendations in the report and Annex 13 that was circulated as a supplement. Councillor Elliott, please.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the news reports today, I see that the Budget Council meeting in Lincolnshire lasted 8 hours and the Wiltshire one started at 10 a.m. this morning and only finished an hour ago. I'm hoping that whilst allowing for appropriate debate, we can be a bit shorter than that. I'm proud to present to Council a balanced budget proposal that, despite £12.5 million of funding cuts over the next 3 years, protects frontline services and invests in the things that matter to the residents of Bath and North East Somerset. I'm going to focus largely on the revenue budget and leave comments on some of the more exciting capital projects we're investing in to other colleagues. And I want to start by saying something that I don't think is controversial. Local government finance is already hard. It's hard because demand is rising, particularly in social care, and because cost pressures have been relentless. But this year we've had an extra complication that has made the process even more unnecessarily difficult: the government's fair funding reforms and the way they've been handled. The reforms are, in the government's own framing, a major overhaul of how funding is allocated between councils, the most significant in a generation, in fact. The report sets out the core principles they've described: grant simplification, needs-based allocation, business rates reset and transitional protection over 3 years. Some of those principles sound sensible in the abstract. No one would argue against transparency or predictability. But the reality for councils trying to set a lawful budget is that the process has imposed uncertainty at exactly the point when we needed most certainty. Trying to set a balanced budget when you don't know what your funding is quite tricky. The government did not provide any exemplifications. There were no worked examples showing what the changes would mean for individual councils before the provisional settlement. As the report explicitly states, this uncertainty and lack of exemplifications have made financial planning extremely challenging. And this is not some abstract complaint. The provisional local government finance settlement that finally included the 3-year allocations was announced on the 17th of December, right at the end of the calendar year, just before Christmas, when we were already deeply into budget setting and public consultation. The budget setting process began well over 8 months ago, way back last summer. To put it bluntly, this is no way to run a country. And the people who pay the price for that are not ministers, it's the residents and the councils trying to keep the services running. So what does the fair funding reform do to us? On the government settlement, the negative impact of fair funding will be roughly £12.5 million a year by 28-29. 2.42 million next year, 5.12 million more in 27-28, and another 5 million in 28-29. So in 3 years' time, we are going to be £12.5 million worse off every year than we would have been without these changes. That is not a rounding error. It's the kind of number that would normally translate into dramatic service reductions if you responded to it by panic cutting, which is not what we have done. It is, however, going to place a huge amount of pressure on the Council over the coming years. The report explains why the formula moved against us. We're judged to have lower relative need than areas with higher deprivation. The formulas consider us to have a relatively higher ability to raise resources locally because of the tax base, and the business rate reset redistributes growth. I want to be very clear that I'm not arguing against councils with higher need being funded properly. What I am arguing against is a system that asks councils to take big funding hits while giving them late, partial and shifting information and then expects them to carry on as normal. Despite that, this administration and our officers have put together a package that delivers a balanced budget for 2026-27. After accounting for service cost pressures and new funding requirements, the funding gap for 26-27 was assessed to be £7.24 million. That was the gap we had to close. We will close that through £2.59 million of income generation and £4.65 million of cost reduction. We've closed that gap while continuing to recognise that the biggest pressures on councils nationally and locally are social care pressures. the report highlights the scale of budget growth built into the plan, including adult services budget growth of £5.51 million and children's services budget growth of £4.07 million, amongst the largest material items requiring additional funding. Even taking the savings proposals in social care into account, that is still a net increase in social care funding of £6.4 million overall. Our strong focus with that increased spending will be on prevention. The only way to arrest these huge inflationary pressures across the Council, whether in social care or in any of the other services the Council delivers, will be to intervene earlier in an effort to prevent higher costs materialising later. But that is not easy in an environment where central government is cutting funding. This is the difference between responsible administration and performative politics. We have not pretended that the pressures don't exist. We have not built a fantasy budget. We have been honest with ourselves and with the public about the pressures, and we always will be. We have sought to protect our most vulnerable residents, and we have still brought forward a lawful, balanced plan for next year. On council tax, the report proposes a 2.99% increase in general council tax and a 2% increase in the adult social care precept, an overall 4.99% increase. That means a Band D property will see an increase of £90.97 a year, which is £1.75 a week. Most councils with social care responsibilities across the country will be proposing a 4.99% increase. I know members across the Chamber and certainly residents will have different views on council tax. As Liberal Democrats, we do ourselves. It's not how we would choose to raise this income. But there are some political truths we shouldn't ignore. First, the government's core spending power assumptions bake in the idea that councils will raise council tax by the maximum 4.99%. It's absolutely part of their core assumptions when calculating what councils have available to them to spend. Nationally, council spending power is increasing overall by 15.5% over the next 3 years, but locally, our core spending power will increase by just over half that, at 8.4%, barely keeping up with CPI inflation, and way, way below the level of inflation we're seeing in social care costs. Second, the fair funding changes are explicitly shifting the system further towards councils like ours raising more money locally as other elements of government funding tighten, a trend which we've seen for years now. Government takes central funding away and then expects councils to make up the difference with council tax. Third, the proposed rise in council tax will raise just over £7 million, only slightly more than the net increase in social services spending. So the council tax rise basically just covers the pressures on social care. Finally, residents of Bath and North East Somerset have the third lowest council tax of all South West unitary authorities, and once North Somerset raise theirs by 9% this evening as expected, will be the second lowest of all South West unitary authorities. And yet this budget is not having to make the same kinds of service cuts that other authorities are having to. We are providing excellent value for money. And it's not just me saying that. At the beginning of this month, the Municipal Journal ranked us in the top 10 most productive councils in the country, at number 5, in fact. So, Chair, I'll close by saying that I think we have produced a robust budget. Despite the fair funding uncertainty, we're presenting deliverable savings and income plans, and we're maintaining the right balance of prudence and ambition. The truth is, if we can set a balanced budget in a year when we were hit by fair funding uncertainty, received final information late, and still have to cope with significant rising demand and reduced central government funding, then I think we're doing the job residents sent us here to do. I cannot commend the officers highly enough on the huge amount of dedicated and committed work that has gone into preparing this budget, and I move the recommendations set out in sections 2.1 to 2.4 of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Guy, can I ask you to second this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, Councillor Elliott has done a superb job in presenting the Administration's balanced and responsible budget proposals. I thank both him and his officer team for their amazing hard work. And Mark has asked me to say a few words on the capital budget, which we all know is very, very different to the revenue budget. Under the Prudential Code, capital plans must be affordable, prudent and sustainable. And we have to take decisions with full regard to the long-term revenue implications and risk. The capital programme in this report is deliberately structured to make scrutiny clearer, It keeps a firm separation between schemes with full approval, meaning they are all ready to proceed and ready to subject project programme, are ready to go, in other words. Schemes with provisional approval, which still require further officer or member decisions before they come forward for approval. The distinction is important, ladies and gentlemen. Not every project is ready to go tomorrow, and this allows proper pipeline management and planning. In headline terms, the report includes a summary of the programme for the next 5 years and shows capital schemes for full approval totalling £230 million, provisional approval of schemes to £280 million, with an overall financing showing just over £510 million of capital schemes. The financing is a mixed setup, and the report clearly shows that these are made up of different aspects, including grant funding, it includes some borrowing, it includes capital receipts, and includes third-party contributions. We're being explicit that capital decisions must be taken alongside their revenue consequences, though. On governance and risk, the report outlines risk management at multiple levels, including project contingencies. Also, a funding corporate capital risk contingency of just over £2 million is included in the project. Capital schemes relate to every area of the Council's activity and respond to key issues residents raise, such as highway maintenance, etc. I hope the Cabinet colleagues will highlight some specific schemes from their portfolio shortly, but I'd just like to concentrate on 3 projects. Firstly, investigating the potential to generate hydroelectric power from the River Avon, given that the Pulteney radial gate has become obsolete. Secondly, moving ahead with preparatory work for new educational facilities at the Culver Hay site, which desperately is needed for new SEND places within Baines. And thirdly, the recently approved funding scheme to help cared-for children out of private care homes and into family foster homes, and I'm sure everyone will welcome that. Such schemes leverage our ability to invest, to make life better for our residents. I can see my time is running out, so I'll be very quick. The Chair's colleagues, we face many challenges at this Council, Chair. Rising demand, rising costs, limits places from central government, limited funding from central government. This budget meets those challenges head-on. It makes provisions for vital frontline services in which all of our residents rely on, and shows the scale and ambition of this administration and secures the future for Bath and North East Somerset. I therefore second the report, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. Almost within the time, but thank you for that. I'd now like to invite Councillor Robin Moss to make a statement as Chair of the Corporate PDS panel.
Thank you very much. We had a meeting of the Corporates PDS panel on the 3rd of February, where we invited the chairs of both the Adults, Health and Wellbeing Policy Development Committee, Children, Adults, Health and Wellbeing Policy Development Panel, as well as the chair of the Climate Emergency and Sustainability Policy Development Panel. So, in no particular order, I'll go through the points that were raised at that meeting. Councillor Romero gave feedback from the panel that she chairs, identifying the increasing pressure and significant demand, rising demand for children's services and adult social care generally. Without government reform of social care funding, the situation is likely to continue this trajectory. The panel also looked at proposed savings relating to increased Care Act reviews, and officers provided reassurance that reviews will remain person-centred based on eligibility and outcomes. And also concerns were raised about the joint working between the Council and the integrated care boards, particularly as those integrated care boards seem to be expanding in size and therefore becoming increasingly remote from the local authorities which they partner with. The panel reviewed the top 25 contracts and asked for more transparency. But positively, it was noted that children's services are continuing on slowing growth rather than finding new savings. The panel still had some questions about how savings, particularly relating to the transition from high-cost residential placements to supported tenancies, would be achieved without reducing support. Councillor Andy Waite from Climate Emergency Sustainability Policy Development Panel highlighted that the panel had fewer statutory pressures, but was concerned about potential reduction in opening hours at the Bath and Midsummer Norton recycling centres, but at that point in time, those reductions had been withdrawn by the administration, so that was welcomed. The panel examined funding for school streets, supported bus services and community travel initiatives, and was reassured that those were supported through earmarked reserves or WECA-related funding. There were concerns raised about clean air zones, operational deficits and parking charge increasing, affecting small businesses. Officers said that evidence did not show a direct link between parking charges and high street health. There was possibly a degree of disagreement on that interpretation with panel members and officers around that. And finally, members of the Climate Emergency Panel emphasised the need for clear communications around waste, recycling and transport changes. More generally, and looking at some of the corporate issues that were raised, it was noted and recognised that information came through late from government, and that the late fair funding review didn't help in that process, and recognised that. But it was also seen that this was part of a 3-year fund. So the opportunity for more scrutiny at an earlier date would be possible in the next 2 years, and it's certainly on the corporate scrutiny panel's work programme to look at how we do that early and how we get proposal suggestions, policy development in early. There was a discussion about how the £150 per Band D household from Heritage Services, that's the average, because of the Roman baths, actually assisted, very much assisted with the Baines budget, but there were consequences from that, and I'll go into that in some more detail a bit later on in this meeting. Generally, there was thanks to officers and to the members for the presentation to the panel. It was recognised, as I said, that the information came out late, but that won't be something that can be used or discussed next year, because we'll have the figures ahead of time. We have the figures ahead of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Now, you've got a second bite of the cherry, Councillor Moss, because you're now going to make a statement on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you very much. Yes. It's interesting that we tend to treat this budget meeting as a one-off. And we do comment about how in some other councils these meetings can go on for 8, 10, 12 hours, and that's been my experience in the past, that's happened. But I think it's a mistake to treat, and the Labour Group thinks it's a mistake to treat the budget as a simple one-off exercise in February, and we kind of look at how that goes during the year, of how spending goes against those targets. It should be seen alongside everything else that is going on, and particularly highlighting the local plan that is being discussed at the moment, that how housing and infrastructure is being planned over the next 10 years and beyond, and the budget should be seen as the engine that drives change and improvement in people's lives alongside those other developments, alongside the other planning. Because, of course, Mark raised the issue about assumptions that are made by governments about the ability of councils to raise revenue through growth. And it's the one big problem, I believe, that Baines Council has, is our stagnant growth over the last period. The latest set of figures that we have, and I appreciate it's from a couple of years old, but it is on our strategic evidence base, actually shows that nationally growth is running at 50% over a period. The comparator is that in the west of England, that is running at 55%, so slightly above the national average, but in Baines it's at 11%, considerably lower than the national average. And I think there is a systemic issue for us as a council in the way we set our budget, because we are very lucky in that we have the income that comes from the Roman baths, and that we are understandably protective about that income, but it's important to look at the consequences of having a city that is based on tourism, on tourist income, and clearly there are issues with the local plan about housing and infrastructure within the local plan. Because we have an economy in Bath and North East Somerset where we have lower wages than the WECA average, we have higher housing costs, but we have a tourist economy that relies on hospitality, tourism and retail, usually close to the minimum wage. So people have to live in North East Somerset and come into Baines to actually support that economy. I believe that that is driving down growth. And I also believe that this is part of the discussion that we will have about the local plan, about how we actually address that. And I don't have a simple solution to how we protect the goose that raises the golden egg, tourism income in Bath, but I think we do have to look at and have to challenge how we use and how we adapt to tourist income, because when I moved across to this area from Bristol 20 years ago, Baines was seen at that point in time as having high value, high tech work, and that seems to have stalled. So the Labour group recognises that this is a balanced budget, recognise it's a budget that's put together in difficult circumstances, but believes that the challenge over the next 3 years and beyond with the local plan is how we use the budget in order to increase growth, increase income and improve people's lives, income and housing opportunities. The budget is part of that overall plan, but does not sit in isolation on its own.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. I would now like to invite Councillor Sean Hughes to make a statement on behalf of the Independent Group.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, we seem to be presented with budget figures that lack essential context and historical data. Without that context, it's impossible for councillors or indeed the public to properly assess performance or understand the direction of travel. Something we've noted annually, but there seems to be a reluctance to provide more clarity. So I'm sure you'll be relieved to hear that in light of this, our remarks today will be brief. So let me begin with what we support. There are many areas of the budget that we support, particularly the commitments within children's and adult social care, where the Council broadly meets its statutory duties. We also welcome new initiatives such as the Culverhay School Project, which aims to strengthen provision for children with special educational needs. We also acknowledge that this is against the background of the challenges created by the Fair Funding Review. However, several concerns remain. First, the ongoing lack of meaningful investment in economic growth. It appears that this administration remains heavily reliant on heritage services and tourism rather than developing a more diverse and sustainable economic strategy. That approach becomes even more uncertain when coupled with rising costs for visitors, including potential of the introduction of a tourist tax. Secondly, parking charges. Yet again, we're seeing these treated as a financial cash cow, with further increases laid on top of previous expansions and new emissions-based penalties. The residents will now pay more depending on the size of their vehicle. There seems to be little concern for the impact this has had on local high streets or on residents already struggling with the cost of living crisis and rising council tax. We now see the emergence of a new member of the cash cow herd with potential charges for vehicles stopping in yellow boxes, projected to raise around £250,000 and clearly intended to increase revenue, but without solving the congestion that is at the root of the problem. Taken together, reduced bus services, withdrawal of subsidies, weaker park and ride incentives and higher parking charges and new enforcement fines risk making Baines less attractive to visitors at precisely the moment where our local economy needs sustainable footfall. We also note the announcement that the Clean Air Zone is projected to lose £800,000 this year, a figure that needs to be clarified with the wider public. Residents understand that these are difficult times. Many accept that the increases are unavoidable and that supporting vulnerable children and adults is a shared responsibility, even during a cost of living crisis. What's harder to justify is asking residents for £20 million for a fashion museum at the same time. When households are choosing between heating their homes, paying their rent or mortgage, and putting food on the table, that request understandably raises concern. The museum historically lost around £500,000 per year, and it's expected to charge an entry fee, while comparable institutions such as the V&A in London offer free admission. Greater reassurance and clearer validation of the financial assumptions is therefore essential. There are further concerns, including the failure of the BR Best programme to deliver the £4.5 million savings forecast by 2025. While savings may not have been the sole objective, they were clearly set as a key performance indicator, and the programme has fallen short by about approximately £4 million. And while we support green initiatives in principle, they must demonstrate clear and measurable benefits for local residents. At present, projects such as solar farms do not deliver lower energy costs or visible environmental gains for our communities. The only identifiable beneficiaries appear to be external shareholders. In summary, we support many of the key financials within this budget, but as we cannot fully analyse the detail, we will need to see how this plays out in the coming year. We are still in a cost of living crisis, and as such, we need to be transparent with the residents to reassure them that we are not wasting their hard-earned money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I'd now like to invite Councillor Joanna Wright to make a statement on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you. Democratic accountability is important at all levels of government. The right to hold leaders to account is a fundamental, non-negotiable cornerstone of a healthy democracy, an essential tool for good governance. Questioning is not merely a formality, but a means to ensure that leaders provide justifications, explanations, and where necessary, accept responsibility for failure. In a recent exchange at Cabinet, a legitimate question was asked about the number of residents that had taken part in the consultation for the budget, and a caustic deflection was offered. The response was a refusal to take the matter seriously, and the questioner was told to back off. There are 59 elected councillors in Baines. These councillors represent 195,618 residents. Only 59 residents took part in the budget consultation. A budget that states it will be bold, empowered, supportive and transparent, giving people a bigger say. Should we call this the accountable Baines budget or the back-off Baines budget? The issue that is central to this empowered budget is the new three-year settlement from central government, the fair funding formula. According to Labour's manifesto, they promise that the fair funding formula will provide greater stability by giving councils multi-year funding settlements, and that this new fair funding settlement should increase a council's core spending power by over 24% by 2029. However, according to the proposed budget before us, Baines will become a net loser from the fair funding formula, and our core spending power will be substantially reduced. The reasoning for this reduction is that Baines suffers less of deprivation compared to other parts of the UK, and so will get less funding. To the average council taxpayer, the terms fair funding formula or core spending power means very little. What they know and what is real to them is that their wages are paying for increased council tax, that they have less services and they see more potholes. Fundamentally, council tax is an outdated, highly regressive system based on 1991 values. The current system forces people in cheaper homes to pay a council tax bill that represents a higher proportion of their property value than those in expensive homes. We know that 292 council areas across England are paying higher rates of council tax than Kensington and Chelsea. What we see is wealth inequality, and this supportive budget does little for those who are poorest in our community. The real issue is one of fairness, and who fairly pays their fair share of council tax. Our current regressive council tax system costs the poorest residents proportionally more of their income than the richest. This is unfair. Council tax is central to this budget. Let's be transparent and state that we are messing at the edges. We need a better system to fund local services. Essentially, we need a national wealth tax, taxing 1% of assets over 10 million, which should then be used to better fund public services. Giving people a bigger say takes place at scrutiny. At a recent children and adults meeting, a local charity boldly told us that cuts from the council to their services were profound, that communication from the council to them was lacking, and that the impact of lost services will have real-world consequences, that many local lives were being negatively impacted. However, the chairs of scrutiny reported little on this. The Lib Dems appear to have chosen a process by which scrutiny is effectively just marking the administration's own homework. In children's services, demand outstrips services, and Baines are 7.4 million over budget. New ideas like technology-enabled care have been created to be a cost-saving lever, yet we still have no definition of what that is. Technology is being treated as a neutral efficiency rather than something that actively shapes decisions in care settings. This council unanimously agreed to support our care leaders, yet this budget uses a cut as a saving, and while acting as corporate parents, this budget chooses to cut 300,000 from young people transitioning to adult social care. Being our best, Bob was a central feature of last year's budget. Bob was going to save Baines money. I am all for wages going up. However, this council promised savings from Bob. Bob has cost Baines more, a shortfall of 2.5 million. Now, Bob has called strike action due to perceived unfairness. Who led Bob? Who is accountable? This is why scrutiny matters. There are also many questions for Baines' commercial estate. Why is the prize jewel, the Roman Baths, income down 2.7 million? The corporate estate down 506,000. Regeneration of Bath Quays South down 481,000. Together, that's nearly £1 million. It would be useful if Economic Resources could explain why the council tax subsidy has doubled down due to more evictions. A reasonable question. There appears to be, from papers, to be lots of delays in delivering capital projects on key priorities like affordable and social housing. The Sustainable Baines portfolio sees delays in tree planting and active travel schemes. I'm nearly finished. The capital programme and its financing over 5 years shows expenditure in the first few years, but then falls off a cliff with no funding and little sign of working towards shovel-ready schemes.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I've let you go on just a little bit longer. Thank you. Now, I'd like to invite Councillor Karen Walker to make a statement on behalf of the Independents for Baines.
Madam Chair, Council members, on behalf of Independents for Baines, we wish to recognise the council tax continues with the same amount of 2.99%, but the increase by Band D property increases by £91 per annum overall. We also recognise the need for 2% adult social care precept because of the financial demand and every 80p of every pound going to the adult social budget. We also understand the pressures and the assumptions to this council. We support the council's corporate strategy to improve people's lives in tackling the climate and ecological emergency and giving a bigger say, as well as the 3 principles for how they will be delivered: preparing for the future, delivering for local residents and focusing on prevention. But I am disappointed not to see in this budget funding for 11 community-run libraries, which provide vital access to books, information, digital services and provide safe, inclusive spaces for residents. Providing warm and cold spaces, the library serves a dual purpose, building on a previous council commitment. These community libraries are primarily managed by volunteers and local organisations with limited funding and resources. Initial Invest to Save support was provided by Baines to establish community libraries, but no long-term dedicated funding stream is in place for the sustainability. Community libraries align with the Council's corporate priorities, ethical values by reducing inequalities, improving well-being, enhancing climate action by promoting local hubs, reducing travel and giving residents a bigger say. Community libraries are a vital part of the universal library service in Baines and should be supported by partners, not left at risk of closure due to unstable funding. Modest ongoing investment from the Council can safeguard these libraries' future, protect volunteers and ensure equal access to library services across the district. Providing a mutative 6,000 to each community library, totalling 66,000, would represent a small cost when contrasted to 2.8 million customer services. Securing sustainability of community libraries strengthens neighbourhood resilience, supports learning, reduces digital exclusion, provides preventative health and well-being. In this building alone, there are posters requesting library volunteers to support the library services. While visiting Westbury-on-Trim and Henleys recently, I was struck by the irony of Liberal Democrat councillors claiming to have fought off the library closures being proposed by the Green Party. Why do Lib Dems councillors in Bristol feel so strongly about the importance of community libraries, when the majority of Lib Dem administration here in Baines is content to leave them under constant threat of closure rather than provide them with even more modest support? Are we not witnessing a glaring double standard amongst the West Country's Liberal Democrat councillors? Personally, I will be supporting this budget as Peasdown has been allocated £250,000 towards upgrading streetlights and roads surfacing. But before I finish, I would like to hope in the next some financial consideration in the future will be given to improving the facilities in the council chamber, especially the seats and the desks, not quite fit for purpose. I can't quite speak for my other independent colleagues how they will vote, but I will be supporting this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. And finally, I'd like to invite Councillor Tim Warren to make a statement on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. You'll be glad to know that it's going to be fairly short, and it's not going to be a party political broadcast, so make a bit of a change tonight. First, I'd like to commend the officers and the Cabinet for coming up with this budget, because it's not easy, and you have to make a lot of cuts. It's very difficult for all of you. I'd then like to wish the backbenchers the very best of luck in defending everything to your residents, the rise. The only thing I'm going to bring up now, and I keep most of it for the main debate, is the assumption, both from the national government and Baines itself, it's going to be a 5% or 4.99% rise. I think it's the wrong way to do it. It's to think, right, we're going to go up, and what can we do for that? You should try and work out the best value to taxpayers, what you can do. It might actually come, you do need to go for 4.99%. I think you start the wrong way round. You actually decide what services, and you do it for the minimum amount you can, because there is still a cost of living crisis, and council tax is expensive now. And I think it helps out a little bit with WECA, but I think we just have to look very hard at what we spend, not just the services, but also in the cabinet budget as well, because that does need covering. There's one or two things which maybe shouldn't be in there, which are, but I'll leave it at that now and bring most of that during the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. You were definitely true to your word about keeping it brief. Thank you. Right. I'm now going to draw Council's attention to the monitoring officer's guidance on the budget setting process set out in item 8, Annex 9, for dealing with any budget amendments proposed at this meeting and consider if they constitute a significant objection to the budget. So the following amendments have been agreed by the statutory officers, and we will take them in order in which they were received. Firstly, the Labour Group amendment, followed by the Green Group amendment. We'll look at the Labour Group amendment. Councillor Elliott, are you prepared to accept it?
No. I was going to say, doesn't it need to be proposed first? Okay. Before I reject it, you ought to propose
I thought I'd get
it.
it right this time. Okay, so the proposer for the Labour Group amendment is Councillor Moss, and the seconder is Councillor Leslie Mansell. So we could roll back a little bit. You're definitely not prepared to accept this, Councillor Elliott. So we'll now go and discuss the Labour Group amendment, which has been proposed by Councillor Robin Moss.
It's very disappointing to know that all the rhetoric that I've got, my well-constructed arguments, have been turned down before I've even opened my mouth. It's like being at home with the family. First of all, I'd like to flag up that custom and practice has been over a few years that amendments will be taken en bloc. And I think we should be looking at that, because this year, as in previous years, there are a number of elements to an amendment, some of which may well be agreed with by the administration or members opposite, some not. But the default position does tend to be, no, we don't agree with that, if there's an element in that that you have a problem with. So I think to flag up for discussion over the next year, how can we make positive suggestions that be considered individually rather than just losing it because there's an element that the administration, maybe understandably, doesn't agree with. Having said that, I think there are two elements to to our amendment. First of all, it's about the rather odd and old-fashioned proposal to salami slice £250,000 from external contracts 25 times 10,000. It's like going back to the 1980s in that there is no detail attached with that. And the second part of the amendment will be looking at discovery cards and how we can enhance that. On the £250,000 from the top 25 contracts, I think the issue is that potentially included in that list are a series of charitable and voluntary sector contractors who actually provide the value for money and the preventative work that this local authority needs. And while I'd actually believe that those contracts won't necessarily be cut, it has raised hairs running and concerns with those in those organisations. Is there potential to be cut? And I talk as in my professional life, I've set up and managed vol sector organisations. Budgets tend to be tight. So we're asking that, first of all, that charity and voluntary sector contractors should be exempted from that contract target list. Also, that public convenience contracts should be exempted from targeting because of the resolution that we passed in July. And also, as I said at Cabinet, the second part of the amendment is looking at a discovery card that will prioritise residents rather than tourists for exemptions and for savings from any income that is going to be generated through tourist levies, such as parking and the rest. Apologies, I've run out of time on that second bit, but I think there are two elements.
Thank you. We now have Councillor Mansell who's going to second this amendment.
Chair, Council, if this administration truly cares about our most vulnerable residents, I'm sure you will agree this budget must protect the services they depend on. I want to focus on what the Equality Impact Assessment tell us and how these findings align with the risks highlighted in the Labour Group amendment. Across the assessments, the same groups appear again and again: disabled residents, children and young people with SEND, carers, low-income households and older people. These are the residents most exposed to changes in adults, children's services and transport. Our amendment reinforces this picture. It lists the services that support these same groups: domestic abuse support, autism services, early years help, targeted youth support, and services that keep elderly or infirm residents safe at home. And it makes one point unmistakably clear: many individuals rely on several of these services at the same time. The assessments show the same households face multiple pressures across different service areas. Our amendment shows that if large commercial firms resist renegotiations, smaller voluntary sector contracts, the ones supporting our most vulnerable residents, will be pushed further down that top 25 contracts list. If this administration truly intends to support our most vulnerable residents, its budget must offer real protection for the services they depend on. And this £250,000 contract savings proposal states there will be no material effect in the assessments on any protected group. Yet our amendment highlights that the administration has not published the list of the top 25 contracts. The officers have said some contracts will be protected without specifying which, and that many of the contracts potentially affected are those that support highly vulnerable residents. If we can't see the list, we can't judge the risk, and if we can't judge the risk, we can't claim the mitigations are sufficient. Finally, the assessments identify risks to statutory compliance in both areas, including SEND, advocacy, autism support, sensory impairment services, domestic abuse support and Age UK support at home. The Council must now show clearly how it intends to uphold its legal duties if those services are weakened or destabilised. Chair, there is now a widening gap between what the equality assessments are telling us and what this budget actually delivers. So when the Council's own assessments highlight risks to all of these vulnerable groups, and when the amendments set out in black and white the services that hold these residents up, then we cannot simply hope that mitigations will work or assume that statutory duties will take care of themselves. So if we generally want to improve people's lives, then we must support this amendment, and that must be reflected in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mansell. Have we any speakers for this statement, for this amendment? Councillor Jackson first.
Thank you. I fully support these amendments. I think they're absolutely crucial. I spent a large part of my life, which I will never get back, yesterday at the call-in hearing at the Sustainability Panel, and I'm still licking my wounds, and my brain cells are still trying to recover. But it became extremely clear at that meeting that compassion for the people who had poverty and problems and were effectively voiceless because they don't use the BAME's website to find out what consultations are going, and the people who are going to suffer with the displacement of the traffic from the so-called livable neighbourhoods were being ignored, that there was no sympathy for the voiceless, which I have to say, as a practitioner of liberation theology, I think it's extremely important that councillors should give a voice to the voiceless, should listen to those who feel marginalised, and definitely, something this budget fails to do something for those who find it difficult to pay their council tax. So what has this got to do with public toilets? An awful lot. You don't want to march into a store and use their toilets if you're not going to buy something. It's an essential thing for the disabled, diabetics like myself, and many other people who don't have the means, a vehicle to bring them into Bath, rely on long bus journeys and so on. So please have a bit of compassion, unlike the members of the panel. And what my own personal amendment would have been to this, if I thought there was any chance of it getting anywhere, we are told in Westfield, or we have been several times, that we cannot have a livable neighbourhood, even where we've got 80% of the residents wanting a livable neighbourhood as opposed to being opposed to it. that we can't have it because they're only for Bath. And this is quite unacceptable. And I think there are a number of elements in this budget which will only benefit people
can you
who live
restore
in
your
Bath,
statement, please?
rather than people who live on the furthest outskirts of the Baines Empire and are not going to have their rural bus services funded in future. Watch this space is all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And I would like to call Councillor Biddlestone, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors and colleagues, the financial pressures on Keynsham residents and Bath and North East Somerset are real and sometimes, as my ward colleague will attest, are urgent. In Bath and North East Somerset, and according to the data previously provided in this chamber, the average price of a home sits at around £420,000. Now, some of these statistics are important, and as I go from meeting to meeting locally, I'm constantly amazed that people don't take on the significance of them, so you'll forgive me, they bear reminding. It's significantly higher than the national average of £274,000. And that stark gap means people here are facing a housing market nearly 50% more expensive than the average in the rest of the country. And it isn't just buying a home that's unaffordable. Rents, I'm sure we know in this chamber, are exceptionally high, and private rents are well over £1,700 a month, among the highest outside of London. Independent research shows that in areas like ours, private renters are now spending well over 40% of their income on rent, and that's far above the 30% considered affordable. At the same time, wages in Bath and North East Somerset for ordinary families do not keep pace with these costs. The UK average salary is £48,000, and the average in Bath and North East Somerset is roughly £44,800. Median earnings then are below national median. And that means that even though people might be working full-time, they are earning less. While facing higher living costs and housing expenses, the pressure hits local households, especially young workers and families and those on modest incomes, particularly hard. So when we talk about this year's budgets, the Labour amendment and our proposals reflect these realities. We call for protecting public services, as we heard so eloquently described by Ed earlier on, essential for dignity, for public health, and for our tourist economy. We, secondly, are asking to protect our community's contracts, supporting those charities and voluntary groups who deliver vital services for those most vulnerable, as we've heard, in our community. And importantly, we ask for greater transparency on those contract savings, so that residents and organisations know which are being affected. Oh my goodness, look at that. Thank you for bearing with me. Our council budget must not add to that squeeze. Instead, we should put residents first wherever we can. Thank you. Protect services most needed in our community and protect fairness. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Biddlestone. If there are no more speakers... Okay, Councillor Hale, please.
Yes, I'd like to support what Dave has just said. We share Keynsham South, which is the fifth most disadvantaged ward in Bath and North East Somerset. And it concerns me that those people who are being covered by our social care, whether it be the young or the old, are only just covered, which is the suggestion that was made in the presentation. So it sort of worries me that there's no wriggle room to look after those people. And it does concern me. What I can't understand is why, if we are in such a tight budget situation, we still continue to do things that aren't vital. The number of TROs that come down the line onto our computers, they all cost money. Now, if we had an enforcement situation where people were actually dealing with those that fail to comply with what the TRO is setting out, I could understand it. We tinker with speed limits throughout the authority area. Some I can understand and agree with, others just leave me wondering why. But the Avon and Somerset Police Force has virtually no roads policing to speak of. So if we tinker with the speed limits, there's nobody enforcing them. And I think you only have to stand at the side of a road with a 20 limit and just work out how many people are actually obeying it. So I think we have to think again on some of the things we do until we have the, if you like, the flip side of the coin, that we can enforce it. I mean, Keynsham High Street, well, double yellow lines means that's spare parking, and the controlled zones of the pedestrian crossings, that's reserved parking. If you can't find space on the double yellow lines, put it on the zigzags. So it's all a bit of a nonsense at the moment, folks. And I just wonder, when we are so short of money, whether there is any regret over the other side about the bollards that apparently cost us £10 million to keep terrorists out of the middle of the city centre, but only during the working day. So as you're going back to your cars, be very careful, just in case something's been left. The cynic in me actually believes nothing to do with terrorism, and it's all about keeping cars out of the way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hale. So if there are no more questions, no more statements from the...
Just a point of order, please,
yeah.
Chair. I came to the end of my moving...
Excuse me, I beg your pardon. Which point of order?
Number 27, is it?
Well, you have to be sure of it, I'm sorry.
Well, you're looking at. I think I was only given 3 minutes to actually move my amendment rather than 5, which is why I ran out of time.
Councillor Moss, I was actually given 3 minutes on my sheet. That was the amount of time. So I do apologise. You thought you had 5 minutes, and I know I did cut you off in mid-flow, but it was actually 3 minutes. Okay. Okay. Well, finally, if there are no more statements, Councillor Elliott, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Chair. The Labour amendment, as Councillor Moss said, is in 2 parts, and it's very odd because it doesn't actually propose any amendments to the budget. The first part completely and totally misrepresents a saving in the budget. The overall saving is about ensuring that we get appropriate value for money out of public funds. It's not about cuts. There are no reductions in service planned as part of this saving. It's about contract management. In other words, controlling costs and extracting value for public money from existing contracts. The Labour amendment states it is fair to accept that large commercial firms on this list are more likely to fend off fresh contract negotiations than third sector organisations. It's a shame that Labour seem to have such a poor opinion of our officers' ability. The toilet contract in particular, that the Labour group seems so exercised about, is one of those contracts with a large commercial firm. It's worth over £5 million. We are absolutely committed to maintaining and improving the toilet provision in this city, but surely that doesn't exempt us from getting value for money out of large commercial operators. To be clear, we are committed to reviewing our public toilet provision, and a revised strategy is being drafted and will report back in the next few months. This budget line does not affect that at all. Our top 25 contracts have a total value of over £1.2 billion. They're all worth well over £1 million each. In some cases, hundreds of millions over a number of years. So we're talking about a tiny percentage of overall contract value. It is absolutely the right thing to do to target the officers responsible for managing those contracts with savings targets to make sure they're focused on providing value for money for the taxpayer. I am not prepared to entertain a list of exclusions because any company, institution or body in receipt of public funds should be subject to the same level of scrutiny to ensure they're providing value for money. This is the kind of thing that anyone who has any experience of working for a business of any size will recognise as a perfectly sensible and reasonable proposal. Opposing proper contract controls is the kind of nonsense that means Labour have a terrible reputation for financial management. And making sure that we provide value for public money is how we've managed to have the third lowest council tax in the South West, and probably the second lowest after this evening, of all the unitary authorities, while still providing excellent levels of service. The second part of the amendment suggests ways to develop the Discovery Card. Again, it doesn't actually propose any amendment to the budget. We've already asked officers to have a look at how we might develop out the Discovery Card, and we don't need an amendment to the budget to do it. There are a few perfectly sensible suggestions here. Certainly, I've already seen South Gloucester's residents' app, and I think it looks great. But as I say, we don't need a budget amendment to do what we're already doing, and we have to vote on the whole amendment, as Councillor Moss has pointed out, so there's no way I'm supporting the first part of it, so I'm asking colleagues to vote against it. Thank you.
We will now proceed to the vote.
Yeah, so from the
Just to make absolutely clear, you are voting in favour of this amendment or against this amendment or abstaining. Okay, yes. Just to make it absolutely clear.
So, yes, we've got 7 for, 37 against, and 7 amendments. So that is lost.
Abstention.
Sorry, abstention. Yes, that's what I thought I said. But yes, those. Thank you. Sorry.
Well, I think we know the amendment has failed. We're now going to go on to the Green Group amendment, which has been proposed by Saskia Elgas and seconded by Joanna Wright. Councillor Elliott, are you prepared to accept this amendment?
No. But you need to get it proposed first.
Move and second it, and then he could say no. Yeah,
apologies, I did get this wrong last time, and I thought I'd got it right now. Okay. Over to you, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair.
Great.
This is a modest amendment, £4,500 for a one-year software licence, but it addresses a very real and growing problem. A local resident contacted me after finding themselves worse off following recent benefit changes. I then did some further research, spoke with officers and contacted the Care Centre to understand whether this was an isolated issue. It is not. Officers currently do not have the ability to see how many residents are sitting at the edge of a band within our local council tax support scheme, nor can they easily identify how many are being pushed into a lower band when their income changes slightly. That means we cannot properly assess how national benefit changes are interacting with our local scheme. The Care Centre was very clear. Unpaid carers are already time-poor, exhausted and navigating a complex system. They're jumping through hoops to access support. When small increases in benefits result in them being financially worse off because they fall into a lower council tax band support, that's not just frustrating, it's deeply unfair. And yes, we do have a local hardship fund, the welfare support scheme, but that's another application process, another hoop to jump through, and it offers one-off financial support or food bank vouchers. It is not a structural solution to someone being made permanently worse off because of the way our banding system interacts with national benefit changes. We're still living within a long shadow of austerity. 14 years of cuts hollowed out local government and left many residents on the brink. And while the current Labour government has spoken about lifting people out of poverty, the reality on the ground is that too many families are struggling. Incremental national changes are not in themselves lifting people out of hardship, and in some cases their interaction with local schemes is creating unintended losses. So, as a practical example, someone receiving an 85% council tax discount might see their carers allowance increase by £35 per month. That modest uplift could move them into a lower band of council tax support, reducing their discount to 60%, and their council tax bill rises by £75 per month. They are then £40 worse off per month, despite receiving a benefit increase. Later this year, the cruel two-child benefit cap will be lifted. That will increase income for some households, but unless we properly model the impact on our council tax support scheme, we risk repeating these cliff edge effects. Our local tax support scheme was revised in 2023, and that work was welcome, but the policy landscape is shifting again. Any review takes time and requires detailed modelling. Purchasing this software is the first step. It gives officers the tools to understand the data properly and bring forward evidence-based proposals. And importantly, this will be funded from the existing service budget. Officers have confirmed that this software has been purchased on occasion in previous years when required and managed within that existing budget. So this amendment simply ensures that capacity is in place to begin the work now. This is about fairness, good governance and preventing unintended hardship. I hope you will support it.
Many thanks. I believe, Councillor Wright, you are seconding this.
Thank you, Chair. At its heart, this amendment is not about making immediate changes to the council tax support scheme. It is about equipping ourselves with the evidence we need to make good decisions. Without the right modelling tools, we are effectively operating in the dark, unable to see how many residents are sitting at band thresholds or how many are being pushed into lower levels of support due to national benefit changes. We have heard about carers, low-income families and others who are already under significant pressure. Small changes in income should not leave people worse off because of unintended interactions within our local scheme. And while we do have hardship provision, that is reactive and temporary. What we are proposing here is preventative and structural. The scheme was revised in 2023, but further national changes are coming, including the lifting of the two-child cap. If we are serious about fairness, we must understand the impact of those changes locally. This is a modest, manageable cost within the existing service budget. It is a practical first step towards a considered review based on data rather than assumption. Please support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Now, Councillor Elliott, are you prepared to accept this amendment?
No, sorry.
I will open it up for debate, but before I do so, I would like to read out a message from the Green Party, who are saying that this sentence needs to be removed, and it's just under number 1, savings from commercial income risk reserve, and that needs to be removed. So I now open the amendment up to debate. Are there any speakers who'd like to speak? If there are no speakers who'd like to speak, Councillor Elliott, do you want to sum up? Oh, sorry, Councillor Moss, are you going to speak?
Yes, just speaking as Chair of Corporate PDS, we do review on an annual basis the council tax support scheme, and certainly irrespective of whether this amendment is passed or not, we will certainly be reviewing. My problem with this amendment is that the numbers in it are inaccurate, first of all. I believe the carers allowance is going up about £3 a week, not the number here. Also, as in my previous life, a director of an advice centre, and I know we've got a director of the Citizens Advice Bureau here, the wider issue is making sure that people get those benefits to which they are entitled, and that isn't about the council tax support scheme. That is making sure we properly fund citizens' advice and similar organisations so people can get independent advice about entitlement in what is a changing landscape for benefits, universal credit, carers, as well as the two child's benefit cap being lifted.
Thank you. Councillor Elledge, would you like to sum up?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This amendment, as with the Labour one, is an amendment that doesn't amend the budget. It relates to a £4,500 software purchase, which the amendment acknowledges the officers have confirmed they can buy if and when they need it for exercise within existing service budgets without any additional budget. For context, the overall budget we're debating today sets gross expenditure at nearly £480 million. I've already discussed the local council tax support scheme with the members privately, and I suggested then that the correct way to approach this is through PDS. They've subsequently asked a Cabinet question, and I responded in writing that I'm happy to pursue this through PDS. They've now produced this amendment, and my answer is the same. PDS is the correct route for this. For background, in case members aren't aware, council tax support for residents on low incomes is, bizarrely in my view, left up to individual councils to organise. So there are 296 different support schemes across the country. Our scheme was last looked at a relatively short time ago in 2023. I believe it's a relatively generous scheme. One of the changes we made in 2023 was to introduce a 100% reduction for the least well-off residents, something which less than 50% of councils do. The scheme went through PDS, through public consultation, and was presented to full council in November 2023, voted on and supported unanimously at that time. The issue the amendment is attempting to highlight relates to the banding of council tax support. The advantage of banding is that most residents' support remains stable even if their income moves a bit. Every time a resident's council tax support changes, we have to issue a new bill. So if you have an infinitely tapered scheme for residents on low variable incomes, that can mean 12 separate bills a year based on what they earned that month. Splitting the scheme into wider bands, in the way ours does, removes that problem and is widely recommended as the correct approach. Nevertheless, I acknowledge the issue around cliff edges, which has been highlighted, which is an inevitable downside of wider bands, and I'm happy for Corporate PDS panel to take another look at this and see if it can be improved. As I say, PDS is the correct route for this. But none of this requires a budget amendment, and I really don't think we should be encouraging performative, non-substantive, non-budget budget amendments. So I'm asking members please to vote against this amendment, and let's simply take it through the correct channels. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We will now go to the vote. We're going to have that for mine. Now we go. It's what? Bit quick.
So that is 46 against, 5 for and 4 abstentions. So that is lost. Thank you.
We now return to the substantive motion on the actual budget. So We've had a proposer, we've had a seconder, and I now invite speakers on this. Councillor Sarah Warren.
So our commitment is to lead the UK in climate and nature action, net zero, nature positive by 2030. We've just heard about what an incredibly difficult year this is in local government, with seemingly never-ending cuts and continuing pressure across our statutory services. So in that context, it's positive that we are continuing to deliver on the climate and nature priorities we set out in recent years. Our portfolio of Greener Places projects receives £350,000 of new capital funding in this budget. This programme aims to support delivery of planned and managed wild spaces wherever needed throughout the district, whether for our residents' health and well-being, for nature recovery, to support growth, or to adapt to climate change. We're also investing to provide biodiversity improvements on council land, supporting our commitment to manage 30% of our land for nature by 2030, and drafting a tree and woodland strategy for the district, setting out how we will double tree cover by 2050. And we've allocated funding to provide more support to residents and landowners with tree planting, as council land constitutes only a small percentage of the land in Baines. At our multi-award winning Keynsham Recycling Depot, alongside £3.5 million set aside over 5 years to electrify our waste and recycling fleet, we have also allocated £1.1 million to install EV charging from our solar panels, not only increasing the sustainability and resilience of council activities and reducing pollution, but also saving on running costs. There's good news in our parks, with £75,000 set aside for the Parks for All project, aiming to make parks more accessible and inclusive. Another £75,000 per year for 5 years for the Parks Pulse project, installing sports equipment, and £360,000 to continue our rolling programme of play area refurbishments. On climate resilience and adaptation, the Highways team have allocated £650,000 of capital for flooding, including both highways schemes and funding to update the local flood risk management strategy. This figure provides opportunities to develop sustainable urban drainage and natural flood management, which are nature-based and environmentally friendly solutions to the management of water, as opposed to more traditional hard infrastructure. It's been an unbelievably difficult challenge to make the budget stack up, with less funding coming to us directly from central government, alongside removal of external sources we used to access, such as WECA's Green Recovery Fund and the Public Sector Decarbonisation Fund. In that exceptionally difficult context, I'm very proud of our officer team for finding ways to continue our vital work on climate and nature that is so central to ensuring our communities can respond and adapt to the intensifying environmental crisis.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Hodge, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sustainable transport delivery is not just about getting from A to B. It's about whether a teenager can safely pop out to the gym, whether a parent can cargo bike their children to school. It's about whether an older person can cross to the GP surgery or local shop. Last year, we didn't just carry on with business as usual, we found extra for new initiatives. Park and ride services running to 11:30 p.m. in the evening, speed indicator devices to tackle speeding, car club provision outside Bath, and 4 new school streets developing at a pace. This year, Council, we've allocated the largest ever budget to safer active travel at £2.9 million. Since 2004, we've increased expenditure on ward schemes fourfold, bringing more pedestrian crossings, more traffic calming and more 20-mile-an-hours. To meet our net zero ambitions by 2030, a 25% reduction in miles travelled by car is needed. It's not no car use, it's less car use, if you can. We need to cut emissions fast, which means enabling greener travel for those with choices. Whilst the fair funding settlement has left us with little extras for extras, all available levers are being used to deliver choices. Our local active travel safety programme will provide for 23 new ward schemes, including 11 pedestrian crossings and 14 new 20-mile-an-hour zones. This year, at least 2/3 of the schemes are located in Ness, attracting almost 70% of the budget. Big-ticket schemes include pedestrian crossings and speed reductions on the Kilmerston Road in Wadstock, crossings in Westfield, and safety improvements on Charlton Road in Keynsham. Turning to the highways maintenance budget, which provides not only for resurfacing and potholes, but also for highway structures such as Cleveland Bridge, street lighting, drainage and footways, we again dealing with a legacy of underinvestment, with the basic maintenance graph static at 5.4 million since 2019 against a backdrop of increasing costs. At 9.6 million, we're again ensuring an increased budget essential to battle and maintain steady-state condition. This year, I've prioritised addressing inequalities. Too many communities feel left behind. Stepping out of your home to a crumbling pavements or a pitted road service contributes to a sense of neglect. You'll see resurfacing on Haycombe Drive, Whiteway, Highland Road, Twerton, Lansdowne View, Southdown, and Eckwood Road, Peasdown, Eckwood Road area, Peasdown. But we're not just resurfacing roads, we're also spending an extra on footways of around £1 million. Finally, this year we are delivering a massive £26 million of WECA CRS grant-funded sustainable transport schemes, including through the Summer Valley and Bath City Centre. Sincere thanks must go to our highways team for their hard work responding to the challenges of this much expanded programme of works. This is an administration determined to enable travel choice for all and get things done. I commend to you an ambitious capital programme.
Councillor May.
Chair, thank you. Like all local authorities with responsibility for children's services, the demand and complexity of individual cases place enormous financial burdens on the Baines budget. Despite this, we are protecting the most vulnerable in our community. This administration cares deeply about social care and is making sure the funding is in place to meet the needs of children and adults who desperately need support. It's through the brilliant dedication of officers and the hard work of the Cabinet Member for Resources, sorry Mark, that we have continued to fund the service fully. If you look at the Band D tax chart in paragraph 532 of the report, out of the authorities near us, 1, children's services is rated inadequate, and 2, are asking for council tax increases above the cap because of these similar pressures. As the lead member for Children's Services, I'm proud that this Liberal Democrat Baines Council are still delivering for our most vulnerable residents. We are the only authority in the lower end of the council tax charges chart to have retained a good Ofsted quality rating, and this is whilst keeping the council tax increase within the 5% referendum threshold. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Helgers.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to focus my comments on the transport elements of this budget. And firstly, I welcome the continued rollout of 20-mile-per-hour speed limits. 20 miles per hour is not a nice-to-have, it's a fundamental building block in achieving our Vision Zero ambition of no road deaths or serious injuries by 2030. We were tragically reminded of the urgency of this last October, when a pedestrian was killed in a collision with a driver less than a mile from this chamber. Behind every statistic is a devastated family and a community asking whether more could have been done. Slower speeds save lives. If we are serious about Vision Zero, 20 miles per hour must remain a priority and the programme must continue at pace. Secondly, I note the 138,000 in the local active travel safety programme for pedestrian safety improvements on St John's Road in Bathwick. Any investment in pedestrian safety is welcome. However, we must acknowledge that this street could have seen through traffic removed altogether through the Pulteney Estate Livable Neighbourhood Scheme, which was paused in June 2025. Funding for that scheme had already been secured through the CRCS programme. It is frustrating that we're now spending money mitigating the impacts of through traffic on the street where we had a funded opportunity to tackle the root cause. Additional funding for highways maintenance is also very welcome. Our roads and pavements clearly need investment, but resurfacing alone will not solve the problems faced by residents if we do not address inappropriate heavy goods vehicle movements. A study into HGV traffic in Lambridge was completed in 2024 and future actions were agreed, but no funding has been allocated to deliver those actions. Without that commitment, lorries will continue to use residential streets as through routes, undermining safety and air quality and further damaging local roads. And buses must also be central to our vision for sustainable transport. I welcome the fact that there is a clear budget line for buses. Reliable, affordable bus services are essential if we are serious about reducing car dependency and tackling congestion. However, although we are part of WECA and this administration sits on WECA's Transport Advisory Board, there is still no joined-up, transparent process for councillors to raise bus issues with Baines or WECA. I hope that going forward, all councillors will be properly included in shaping and improving this essential service. Finally, I welcome the £240,000 for pedestrian signal improvements. I sincerely hope this funding will be used to reduce waiting times and make crossings more responsive. If we want more people to walk and wheel, then crossings must prioritise pedestrians, not simply the flow of motor traffic. If we are serious about safety, live a genuine shift towards sustainable transport, then we must tackle root causes, improve governance and deliver change within years, not decades. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to reiterate my thanks to Mark Elliott and the Council officers, both in finance and throughout the organisation, who've enabled us to be reviewing such an ambitious, balanced budget in challenging times. Our corporate strategy of investing in prevention is key to this budget and influences much of the work we will be seeing. Investing in Culver Hay, investing in our foster carers, the complex families work aimed at preventing children going into care unless necessary, the Preventing a Second Fall scheme aimed at preventing hospital admissions, housing, specialist housing, home-to-school transport, reducing reliance on taxis. The list goes on and is impressively long. The Community Safe Growth item of £320k ensures we can continue to meet our statutory and critical duties and to keep residents across Bath and North East Somerset safe. We are required to reduce crime and antisocial behaviour, support victims of domestic abuse, use public space protection orders and work with partners to identify and to prevent serious violence. Due to changes in the external funding arrangements, which we are required to backfill, our current resources could not sustain this. This funding includes £35,000, which will strengthen the preventative work that stops harm before it happens, including interventions for those at risk of perpetrating domestic abuse, programmes that reduce repeat incidents and improve the outcomes for survivors. Prevention is the most effective and cost-efficient way to reduce long-term demand on our services. With this growth item, we will be able to strengthen the specialist domestic abuse survivor support that protects both older and younger residents and expands the preventative work that reduces the likelihood of people continuing to be perpetrators. Approving this request means that we can continue the statutory and preventative work that keeps our communities safe. Thank you again to everyone who's pulled this budget together, and I'm very, very happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Bourne. I beg your pardon. We were given your name. You'd put your hand up, so apologies. You can come back later on if you want to go. Right, we'll go on to Councillor Hansel.
Thank you, Chair. Last year's Lib Dem budget included resurfacing the A4 from Salford to the Globe roundabout, a new central pedestrian refuge by the rowing club on the main road, surface dressing for the A39, and the introduction of 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in the back lanes from Salford to Keynsham. The Lib Dems went on to deliver all that was promised for residents. Moreover, in addition, 30-mile-an-hour speed limits are being introduced next month from the edge of Keynsham on Charlton Road out to the Woodard Lane junction, and also in Redlinch Lane, lowering speeds and helping address long-standing safety issues. What about this year? £314,000 has been allocated in the capital budget for the Better Moorings project, Mead Lane. This new money goes with £400,000 already allocated to give a total of £714,000 for the relocation of 14-day moorings to a new purpose-built location away from residential properties. This is amazing news in the current financial climate. Relocation of moorings to a suitable site with facilities is not solely a local Salford matter, but of wider benefit along the river and a positive move for all involved, including boaters. Having the funds available is a significant step forward by this Lib Dem Baines administration to create a better situation for all. There is more in the 2026 budget benefiting local residents. Carriageway resurfacing is planned for Woodard Lane, a busy section of road on the edge of Salford Ward, at a cost of £700,000. I will be voting for this budget because I and the Lib Dem administration get things done for Salford Ward residents. We are not, to quote Shakespeare, full of sound and fury signifying nothing. We work and we deliver. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hash.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to be able to support the budget that's in front of you. The paper shows that central government is diverting funding away from areas like ours. Bath and North East Somerset is left with the third lowest core spending powers in the country. However, even with the adverse national climate funding of local government, it's fantastic to see in the papers that Baines has been able to secure additional funding from WECA for transport investments for our residents. £26 million to improve residents' travel choices and highway safety, as set out in 5.4.7 of the papers. We are getting better at securing and delivering quality projects from this additional transport funding, and we're looking forward to more opportunities with the Transport for City Regions funding allocation that was announced earlier this year. I'm also pleased to see in the budget the ongoing measures to build on our track record of prioritising road safety, and perhaps Councillor Hale also the additional investment in parking enforcement, which will be built into the budget, and many residents will welcome that. So very pleased to support the budget, which shows that our Lib Dem Council has a strong record of delivering good value to our residents while protecting frontline services and our most vulnerable. So I'll be supporting.
Thank you. Councillor Alton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always a bit impressed by the detail and clarity of the budget papers we received by Cabinet members' introductions. There's no need to repeat the scale of the challenge that this budget has to meet. As a member of the Children's, Adults, Health and Wellbeing PDS panel, I hear regularly about the pressures of increasing demands and costs. I'm proud that as a council we're continuing to fund services for the most vulnerable in our society. This coming year, this will include adult service budget growth of £5.5 million and children's services budget growth of over £4 million. That's alongside continuing investment in residents' other top priorities, such as road maintenance, keeping our streets clean and safe, environmental sustainability projects and public facilities. I particularly would like to welcome some key projects in the Somer Valley. In Midsummer Norton, we continue to invest in the High Street through the Midsummer Norton High Street Renewal Programme. We are investing over £1 million in the Midsummer Norton and Westfield walking, wheeling and cycling links, making it easier and safer for residents to travel actively and sustainably. We are investing in new street lighting across Radstock and Midsummer Norton, improving safety and quality of life for our residents. We continue to invest in our green spaces through continued support for Somer Valley Rediscovered. This is what our budget represents: careful stewardship of public finances combined with investment in our communities across Baines. We are meeting challenges head-on and making responsible choices to protect and support the people of Bath and North East Somerset, especially the most vulnerable among us. While I have the floor, and we've talked a lot tonight about adult social care, I also wanted to take this opportunity to celebrate the success of Coombe Lee Care Home in Midsummer Norton. This council-run home was recently rated good by the Care Quality Commission, and the inspector's report highlights that care is safe, supportive and focused in what matters most to residents. Well done to our dedicated team working at the care home, and I tonight will be supporting the budget.
Thank you. Councillor Truby.
Thank you. I welcome this budget, in particular the safety improvements for Western residents on Western Lane, where residents of Montrose Cottages currently have to walk a tightrope along a pavement this wide against the wall. The funding in this budget will provide them with a safe pavement that will allow them to walk from their homes back into Western, be it to school, to the shops, cafes or other local services. It allows them a safer exit from Montrose Cottages by car, and for all Western residents, it provides a safer crossing point on Western Lane than is currently available. This is a win all round, helping residents, improving safety, promoting active travel, and all without impeding motorists and other road users, and I welcome it.
Thank you. Councillor Hedges.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Joan Hurst and I would like to thank Mark because some of the things that we've been after for a long time in Aldown are going to come to fruition. The most important one is the investment in a new special education needs places at Colveray site. Lib Dems have been fighting to get this done for a long, long time. Also, a promise of resurfacing roads in Cranmore Place and Wesley Drive. Actually, that's Wesley Avenue, not Drive. The ongoing lack of investment from government on road surfaces is a bugbear for nearly every resident in Baines, let alone Aldown, and we appreciate that these areas are being prioritised. We are very excited to help our residents, and in particular our more vulnerable and disabled residents, to be able to cross the road at the benefit of new zebra crossing Upper Bluefield Road to access the shops. Really pleased to see investment in play equipment at Corston View, an important green space. Before I finish, Chair, I can't stop without saying this. I listened to our two Labour front bench councillors earlier on talking about vulnerable, elderly and children. I've worked in all three spectrums. And they're going on about the budget not being profound enough or safe enough. Well, what do they think is going to happen in 3 years' time when we lose £12 million from the budget? Money don't come out of fresh air, and nor does care. So I suggest that the leader of the Labour group write to his Prime Minister and say, can we have our money back that you've nicked, please? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We'll have to see what happens in 3 years' time. Right, Councillor Tim Warren.
Oh, how do I follow that last bit? I don't know. I can't get quite as excited about what's happening in Midsummer Norton as Councillor Walls, unfortunately. I think been dealt a middling hand, to say the least. The High Street is receiving another £187,000, which is great. However, when you compare it to Keynsham, who after the last few decades have had probably tens of millions, 30, 40 million probably, it doesn't even bear any resemblance whatsoever. This is following last year's introduction to parking charges, which, for any of you who know that has not helped. It's the people that are on minimum wage that work in the shops now have to pay for parking, or they have to go and get somewhere else. So it hasn't helped. Around the residential streets, a chock-a-block. Just concerns what it says about the recycling centre, where it's being looked at, should we say, and being reviewed, operational changes. I hope it doesn't mean reduced in hours, because that does cover the whole Seymour Valley. And just another one to the others was a safer active travel. I asked for one safety issue to be looked at in Midsummer Norton, which is the big road in and out of Midsummer Norton to Silver Street. There's thousands of new houses at the top, which all come down the same street. This is the big street, the big hill where the kids walk to school. We're trying to encourage that. One side of the road is great, it's got a pavement that goes right to the top. The other side doesn't. Stops halfway up, so after this feasibility study, maybe 5,000 quid, is it in? I don't think it is, unless I missed it. I did ask the cabinet member, but sadly didn't get a response. And this is a serious issue. There's kids that are running across the road, which is getting busier and busier and busier by the day. When you look at a few other schemes that have come up in and around, such as, I won't go into now, one or two villages near me, which I can't think how they possibly got funding where this hasn't, when there's actually, this is a serious safety issue, and it just needs extending, and there is a zebra crossing or a pelican crossing at the top of the hill, which should make it safer for these kids to walk to school, which I believe is what we're trying to do. So perhaps next year we might be able to see for a bit of funding.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Crossley, and I have Councillor Moss, and then Councillor Gurley, Councillor Hale, and I think I'll draw a line under that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think this is a remarkably good budget, and it's set aside a fair funding scheme, which is quite simply not fair funding. How can it be fair funding to take away money government should have been doing, should be to look to have a rising tide and take everyone up, rather than hitting those that deliver good services and good value. And I think that is a shame of this government. We are now the second lowest in the southwest, which I think is quite remarkable, especially when you think of all the good things that are going on. The reworking of Culverhay closed, I think you might recall, by the Tories under a previous administration. And then look at recycling rates. These vary across the country. South Oxfordshire is first at 61.6, and Tower Hamlets is last at 304 with 17.7. But we are at 17th position with 56.9. So I hope during the year the PBS panel will work with the government, the cabinet members, to see if we can go up that ladder a little bit more and get nearer to the top 10, because recycling is something that all our residents take value in and enjoying. Many references have been made for 20-mile-an-hour schemes. When we first started introducing this as a council, a lot of people said it was a waste of time, a waste of money, a waste of space. And yet, it saves lives. In London, where they've done some detailed research, road deaths down 34%. Children killed down 75% from 4 to 1. I think that shows the worth of travelling slower and carrying on with this thing. So I know there's an issue with monitoring and enforcement, but overall speeds are coming down, and slower speeds mean safer roads for all of us, particularly for pedestrians and cyclists. So finally, I'd like to talk about the parks. We've done a lot of refurbishment of parks. One of the issues we do have is parks and play areas that are maintained by other authorities other than this council. So we have one in Southdown. I won't mention it or the organisation, but it is not the council. But we get the blame for its poor state of repairs. So I would ask the Cabinet to start working with other organisations to get their play areas up to the standard that we are doing everywhere. So a good budget, well done to everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Moss.
Thank you. First of all, to reassure council members that, yes, the Labour group is talking to Labour cabinet members and to Labour ministers to make sure that more money comes to local government. And let's remind ourselves, 90% write-off of SENS deficits, £20 million for Whiteway and Twerton. A review of SEND across the piece, which will be interesting to see how that works, and addressing what has been an issue for a number of years. The possibility, the probability of setting a tourist levy so that we can look alongside other European cities for overnight stays. And I have no apology for a Labour government looking at fair funding that is reversing what the Tories did of channeling money to Richmond in North Yorkshire and Richmond in Surrey rather than areas of deprivation. And we know that that will be an issue for Baines in the short term, but that is a discussion that has to go on about poverty and deprivation within Baines as a whole. So rest assured, those conversations are taking place, and this is a government that supports local government. There's much to admire about this budget, and there's much to support in this budget. But, and I come back to the £250,000 taken off the top 25 contracts. I've got no issue with accepting all contracts should be under review. They should be under review on an annual, monthly, quarterly, whatever basis. This is the first time that this has appeared on the, as a budget line, and I do think that looking at the charitable and voluntary sector in the same way as private business sends entirely the wrong message out, that those discussions should take place with all organisations, but it's very Baines to, I'm sorry Michael, if you're referring to the details in Baines budgets, I've only been on the council 13 years. I've never come across a detailed Baines budget yet. It's all very high-level stuff. But I do believe that having that 250,000, 10,000 off the top 25 contracts without exempting charity and voluntary sector is wrong. It sends the wrong message out to partners. And for that reason, without those guarantees, the Labour Group will be voting against this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Councillor Grimley, and then lastly we'll have Councillor Hale in a moment.
I'm sorry to burst Councillor Moss's bubble, but I would point out that the Labour government has reduced funding for buses for this region by 6 million over the next 3 years, so that's 2 million a year. So I am delighted that this council has seen the importance of public transport, particularly buses, including in rural areas. And I really support my colleagues from the fact that we have increased our transport levy to over £500,000 per year for the next 3 years to try and save some of those buses that would otherwise be cut because of the government's cuts. So I am happy to support our budget for the benefit of my residents and those residents in rural areas who really do need to get around. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final speaker is Councillor Hale.
Chair, it's very kind of you to give me this opportunity, but all I was doing was trying to wave your attention over there. Because my colleague was waving her hand over there and getting no success.
I'm not sure what's going on here, but I like to blame Councillor Stevenson-McGaul for making sure you had your name down. Anyhow, we've come to the end. Thank you all for your statements. I now would like Councillor Elliott to sum up if you wish.
Yes, thank you. Listened with interest to the debate. Thank you everyone for your contributions. Just want to highlight a few items and a few misconceptions. The CAS was mentioned and the figure of £800,000 a year. I'm not quite sure where this has come from. It's not accurate. The CAS will not be costing us £800,000 next year. It is true that as it becomes more successful, it's likely that the income in any given year may be more than the cost, but in the early years there were considerable surpluses and they were set aside into a reserve to cover any costs later on, so there is no impact on the revenue budget. Fashion Museum was mentioned, residents are not going to be paying for the Fashion Museum. The Fashion Museum is funded from various capital sources, but none of it is directly from council tax. It will be a superb asset for the people of Baines. It won't be free to all like the V&A, but the V&A receives direct grant funding from government. And we are planning to give free entry to Discovery card holders. So local Discovery card holders will get free entry. Livable neighbourhoods were mentioned, and it was suggested that there aren't any outside Bath. There is Temple Cloud, Whitchurch and Queen Charlton. So there are livable neighbourhoods outside Bath. The Bob saving was mentioned. It hasn't realised the savings that we predicted, but I'm proud of the fact that our review of job roles and salaries in Baines gave 2/3 of staff a pay rise above the national settlement and no one's pay went down. That is something I am not going to apologise for. I think it was a good thing. Council tax, a rare occasion when I agree with Councillor Wright. The council tax completely needs reform. Lib Dem policy is that it should be replaced. But that really isn't within our gift. I do disagree that this budget, however, does nothing for poorest Baines residents. I think it absolutely supports the most vulnerable. In fact, I would say it's one of the key foundations of the budget. I think there were some comments about Midsummer Norton, or it may have been North East Somerset in general. I can't quite remember, but about the split. In spending, actually, if you look at the capital programme for next year, there's £38.5 million to bus-specific schemes and over £47 million on North East Somerset-specific schemes. So, actually, there is a very large investment in North East Somerset capital schemes. One of the single biggest investments in regeneration is in the Somer Valley Enterprise Zone, for example, which is obviously in North East Somerset. I do welcome the 90% write-off of direct schools grant overspends, obviously, but actually that is just the government funding 90% of the overspend that was their responsibility in the first place because they weren't funding it properly. So I'm delighted that they're getting to 90%, but I will admit it was the last government. I'm proud of this budget overall. look around the country, something like 35 councils are asking the government for exceptional financial support. 6 councils over the last 4 years have issued Section 114 notices, effectively declaring bankruptcy. 7 councils are raising council tax above the 4.99% referendum threshold. Not here. The fact that the opposition parties could come up with for amendments were proposals that didn't actually amend the budget shows, I think, how impressive the proposal is. Under huge financial pressure and with significant cuts from central government, we have produced a robust plan that balances our ambitions for the area with prudence and realism about the continuing very significant rises in social care costs and other inflationary pressures. This is a budget that shows our care for the most vulnerable people in our society, that focuses on prevention, that keeps our commitment to tackling the climate and nature emergencies, that maintains our increased investments in roads and fixing potholes, travel, that maintains our waste collections and keeps our area clean and green. I'd like to repeat my thanks to all the officers across the Council for their incredible hard work in pulling together this proposal over the last 6 or 7 months. It's brilliant work and I commend it to the Chamber. I propose we move to the vote.
Thank you. We will now go to the vote.
Okay, that is 46 for, 6 against and 3 abstentions. So that is carried. Thank you.
Thank you. The budget has now passed. We're now going on to item 9, Treasury Management and Investment Strategy Statement. And I believe, Councillor Elliott, you are moving the recommendations.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll keep it brief. We've been here a while. We have a statutory requirement to set the Treasury Management Strategy ahead of the new financial year. So this is the strategic document that sets out the parameters for all the things the Treasury Management monitoring monitors against. Our approach to the oversight of borrowing, investments, risk appetite and the prudential indicators. Treasury Management is the bedrock of sound council finances, making sure that we make investments wisely and only borrow when necessary and prudent. The Treasury Management team do a fantastic job at maintaining that process, and I'd like to thank them for their often unsung but hugely important work. The key components of the strategy are our borrowing should remain cautious and minimise long-term commitments while rates remain high. Our investments are to be focused on security first, liquidity second, yield third, with ethical and sustainable considerations included. And the prudential indicators set the framework for affordable, sustainable and prudent borrowing. This strategy supports delivery of the capital programme, including regeneration projects, climate commitments, schools, social care infrastructure, all of the things that we've been hearing about. And it aligns with the MTFS and our assurance of long-term financial resilience. The strategy aligns with SIP for guidance and statutory obligations and sets out a robust governance framework and a regular monitoring regime, and I therefore move the recommendations set out in 2.1 and 2.2.
Thank you. Councillor Moss, you're seconding this.
Happy to second this. I think it's an underestimated part of council governance, with an organisation that has hundreds of millions of pounds cash flowing through. It is absolutely key that you make best use of that money that is safe, both in investments that are sound, while generating income that putting it in a tin under the bed wouldn't do. So happy to second, and I'm sure this will be unanimously agreed and approved.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott, would you like to sum up?
Happy to move to the vote.
Now go to the vote. How many are there voting altogether? Are there 50?
Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to go to agenda item 10, which is the proportionality review, and this is just to look at the fact that the numbers have changed on the political proportionality chart. I'd like to ask Councillor Guy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. I so move in the report.
Okay, and seconder is Karen Walker.
Yeah,
Councillor
happy
Walker.
to second the recommendation in the report.
Pardon, could you say that again?
She seconded it.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Sorry, I was distracted by my vice chair here. Anyway, moving on. It's been seconded by Councillor Walker. I now have Councillor Bitherston as a speaker.
That's very kind, Chair. I just wanted to say, could we make sure that we're giving people sufficient time to vote? Because I know Eleanor didn't manage to vote in that last vote.
I'm very grateful for you for pointing this out, but we had 50 people, 50 councillors voting, and 50 councillors actually voted. So sorry, 51. We actually double-checked that those who could vote did actually vote. Is Eleanor? Eleanor? Do you want to approach the chair, Eleanor?
Chair, could I just draw your attention to the fact that the voting system gravely discriminates against people with a visual impairment, such as glaucoma, who can't distinguish different colours on the screen, and that somehow or other it's not registering either when I'm trying to vote, and I have to ask Councillor Biddleston to help me, and this isn't right. It should be possible for a member of this council to vote in an acceptable way, equally with other non-disabled members.
Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We will certainly look at this before the next council meeting. Now, if there are any more statements that councillors want to make? If not, Councillor Guy, do you want to sum up?
Happy to move to the vote, please, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, no. There's 51. Okay.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, so we're now moving on to questionnaires from councillors, and these have been circulated. I am now going to close the meeting at 8:55. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.